The coins made a sound that nobody in that store could ignore. Not loud, just small. The soft, deliberate click of metal on wood. One coin set down, then another, then another. In a room so quiet on a Tuesday afternoon in Sanderson, Texas, that every person inside heard it and understood exactly what it meant. A man counting what he had left, hoping the number would change. It was June 1959, the kind of Texas afternoon where the heat sits on your chest like a hand pressing down, and the dust outside the windows hangs in the air long after the last truck passed through. The general store on Main Street smelled like motor oil and old wood and the particular staleness of a building that had been baking in the sun since before most of its customers were born. Roy Caffey sat at the small wooden table near the front window, 54 years old, canvas jacket with a faded American flag patch on the left shoulder. His hands, wide, scarred, the hands of a man who had worked hard and carried weight most people never would, spread the coins across the table one more time. He already knew the count. He counted 4 times. But a man does it again anyway, the same way a man reads a telegram twice even when the words don't change. A loaf of bread, 1 tin of beans, 47 cents short. Dale Burrows stood behind the counter, watching without trying to look like he was watching. He was not a cruel man. He had already told Roy twice, gently the first time, firmer the second, that he couldn't extend more credit this week. The store had its own math to answer to. Roy understood. He hadn't argued. He'd just nodded and gone back to counting, as if the coins themselves might produce an answer Dale couldn't. For a moment no one moved. Then the front door opened. A tall figure stepped in from the blinding white light of the Texas noon. Big-framed, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn canvas jacket and a tan Stetson that had seen real weather. He stopped just inside the doorway, took in the room the way a man does when he's read a situation before anyone said a word. His eyes moved to Roy, to the coins, to the bread. He didn't look away. But that moment didn't start there. To understand what John Wayne did next, and why Roy Caffey would carry it with him for the rest of his life, you have to go back to what those coins really represented. Not just the bread, not just the 47 cents, but everything a man loses, piece by piece, until one Tuesday afternoon in a Texas store, this is all he has left to show for it. Before we go back there, drop a comment right now. What state are you watching from? And have you ever walked past someone who needed help and felt it stay with you? Tell us below. We read everyone. To understand why those coins meant everything, you have to go back 14 years. Roy Caffey grew up in Pecos, Texas, 3rd of 5 children. Father worked the ranches outside town. Sun up to sundown, 6 days a week, no complaints. Mother took in laundry and stretched every dollar until it was transparent. The family wasn't poor in spirit, just poor in everything else. From the time Roy was old enough to understand money, he understood this. A man works for what he has, asks nobody for anything, and carries his own weight without making it anyone else's problem. That was the code, not written down anywhere, just lived, every single day, until it became the only way Roy knew how to be. At 19, Roy married Clara May Henderson, his high school sweetheart, a girl with dark eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. At 21, they had a daughter they named June. Roy worked the rail yards outside Pecos, saved carefully, and put a down payment on a small house on Elm Street with a porch that faced west so they could watch the sunsets. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was his, built by his own hands, his own choices, his own stubborn refusal to ask for help he hadn't earned. Then Korea happened. Roy enlisted in January 1950, not because anyone forced him, because the code said you go when your country calls, and Roy had never once broken the code. He served with the 2nd Infantry Division. He was at the Chosin Reservoir in November and December of 1950. 30 days of combat in temperatures that dropped to 30 below zero. Surrounded, outnumbered, fighting through snow and ice and darkness that had no end. He came home in March 1952 with a Purple Heart, partial hearing loss in his left ear, and something behind his eyes that Clara May recognised immediately and couldn't name. The war had taken something from Roy that wasn't coming back. He tried anyway, worked the rail yards again, showed up, did the job. But the nightmares came every 3rd night without fail. The drinking started slow. 1 beer, then 2, then a bottle alone on the porch after the house went quiet. By 1957, he had lost the house on Elm Street. By 1959, he was drifting through small Texas towns with a Purple Heart in his pocket and 47 cents on a table in Sanderson, and a decision he'd already made quietly inside himself, that this would be his last week. John Wayne was 52 years old in June 1959, and to the rest of the world, he was untouchable. Rio Bravo had just finished filming. The Alamo was deep in pre-production, the most personal project of his career, a film he had spent a decade fighting to make, one he was financing largely out of his own pocket and staking his entire professional reputation on. The pressure that year was the kind that doesn't show on a man's face but lives in his shoulders, in the way he sleeps, in the number of times he wakes up at 3 a.m. running numbers in his head that never quite add up the way he needs them to. He had driven out to the Trans-Pecos region alone. No publicist, no studio driver, no handlers, just Wayne in a truck with a road map and 2 days away from the noise. He did this sometimes when Hollywood got too loud, disappeared into the Texas backcountry where nobody expected anything from him, and the land was honest in a way that people rarely were. He'd been thinking about his father all morning. Clyde Morrison was a pharmacist from Iowa, a quiet, unshowy man who lived by one principle simple enough to fit in a single sentence. You see a man who needs help, you help him. Not tomorrow. Right now. While you still can, Clyde died in 1937. 22 years gone, and Wayne still heard that voice every time he was tempted to look the other way. He stopped in Sanderson for gas and a cold drink, pulled into Dale Burrows' general store at 12:14 in the afternoon. He remembered the exact time because he'd checked his watch at the pump. He hadn't planned to stop in Sanderson at all. He'd meant to stop 12 miles back and missed the turn. He would think about that missed turn for years afterward. When he pushed through the door and saw Roy at that table, the coins spread across the wood, the bread, the flag patch on the jacket. Something locked into place in his chest. He knew that posture, the way a man sits when he is counting what remains, and finding it not enough. Wayne had been broke once too. He knew exactly what those coins cost a man in pride. He crossed the store without hesitating, pulled out the chair across from Roy, and sat down. And then he said 3 words that made Roy's hands go completely still. "You served, son." Roy's hands stopped moving. He looked up slowly, the way a man looks up when he expects judgment and has stopped bothering to defend himself against it. What he found instead was a face he had seen on movie screens since before the war. And that face was looking at him the way nobody had looked at him in years, not with pity, not with discomfort, with recognition, man to man, eye to eye. "Korea," Roy said. His voice came out rough, stripped down to its frame. "2nd Infantry, 50 to 52. Wayne nodded the way men nod when they already understand the weight of what just got spoken. "Chosin?" Roy blinked. "Yeah." Wayne looked at the coins, looked at the bread, looked back at Roy's face. Not at his clothes, not at the state of him. At his face. Then he turned toward the counter. "Dale, ring up whatever this man needs. Full order. I'll cover it." Dale opened his mouth. Wayne's eyes said, "Don't." Dale nodded and reached for a paper bag. Roy pushed back his chair. "Sir, I can't let you—" "Sit back down." Not a command. A request. Man to man. "You carried a rifle in the snow at Chosin Reservoir. Buying you groceries is the least this country owes you." Roy sat, his jaw tightened, his eyes burned. He pressed his lips together hard, the way men do when something is rising that they refuse to lose in public. Wayne set 3 $50 bills on the table. Face down. Quietly, the way you pass something in church. Then he reached into his inside jacket pocket and produced a small handwritten card. A name, a phone number, a veterans outreach contact in San Antonio he'd been carrying for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Man named Frank Delgado. "He helped a friend of mine get back on his feet. You call him Monday morning, tell him Duke sent you. He'll pick up." Roy stared at the card. His hand was trembling. "I had a plan," Roy said quietly. He didn't explain what kind. He didn't need to. Wayne reached across and put his hand on Roy's forearm. Just for a moment. Just enough. "Not today," Wayne said. "Today you eat. Monday you call. That's all." He stood, picked up his hat, walked toward the door. Roy called after him. "Why?" Wayne stopped. Didn't turn around. because my father told me to, and because you earned it." Then he walked out into the Texas sun and drove away without looking back. He never told a single person what happened in that store. Roy sat at that table for a long time after the truck disappeared down the main street. Dale Burrows didn't say anything, just set the bagged groceries beside Roy's elbow and went back behind the counter and found something to busy himself with. Some kindnesses are best honoured with silence, and Dale understood that instinctively in the way that small-town people sometimes do. Roy looked at the card in his hand. Frank Delgado, San Antonio. A phone number written in pen that had pressed hard into the paper, the kind of handwriting that meant the person writing it wanted it to last. He put the card in his jacket pocket, next to the Purple Heart. Monday morning, Roy walked 3 blocks to the payphone outside a Sanderson diner and dialed the number. Frank Delgado picked up on the second ring. Roy told him Duke sent him. There was a pause on the line. Not doubt, just wait. The weight of a man who had heard that name before and knew exactly what it meant. "You're the 4th one," Frank said quietly. "Sit tight. I'm sending someone Tuesday." Someone came Tuesday. A volunteer named Harold drove 4 hours from San Antonio, loaded Roy's single bag into the back of a station wagon, and drove him back without asking a single unnecessary question. Roy was in transitional housing by the end of that week. Clean room, 2 meals a day, a window that faced east and caught the morning light. The nightmares didn't stop. They never fully stopped for men who were at Chosin. But Roy had somewhere to be each morning, which meant he had a reason to get through each night. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. By October, he was working part-time maintenance at a school in San Antonio's south side. Steady pay. A supervisor who handed him a schedule and expected him to show up. Roy showed up every single day. In December 1959, he wrote a letter to Clara May. He didn't ask her to come back, just told her he was still alive and that something had happened in a store in Sanderson that he couldn't fully explain, but that he was trying now in a way he hadn't tried before. She wrote back in February. 1 page. "I'm glad you're trying. June asks about you." Roy folded that letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket, right next to the Purple Heart and Frank Delgado's card. If this story is reaching you, hit like and subscribe right now, because next we tell you what Roy did the year John Wayne died, and it will stay with you. John Wayne died on June 11th, 1979. Cancer. He had fought it twice before, the third time it won. Roy Caffey was 74 years old when the news came through the television set in his San Antonio apartment. He sat in his chair and watched the broadcast without moving for a long time. June called that evening. She had known for years that her father carried some connection to the man. She had seen the card in the wooden box on his nightstand once, asked about it gently, and received only 3 words in return. He was good. But that night, Roy told her everything. The store in Sanderson, the coins, the 3 words, the $50 bills placed face down on the table like something sacred, Frank Delgado's number written in heavy ink, the Monday morning payphone call, the letter from Clara May in February. June listened without interrupting. When Roy finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. "Dad," she finally said, "do you know what week that was?" "In Sanderson," Roy thought. "Second week of June, the 14th maybe. That was 3 days before my 11th birthday," June said softly. "I remember because Mom cried all day." Roy didn't answer. "If that store didn't happen," June said, "you wouldn't have been there for any of the ones after." Roy opened the wooden box on his nightstand, looked at the card. Faded now, soft at the edges from 20 years of handling. He picked up a pen and wrote a letter to Wayne's family that same night. Not to the estate, to the family. He told them what happened, what it meant, what it saved. 3 weeks later, a handwritten note arrived. 4 words signed by Wayne's son, Patrick. Dad would be glad. Roy Caffey died in 2003. He was 98 years old. He outlived John Wayne by 24 years. Which he said more than once in his final decade was 24 more years than he had ever planned on having. In 1995, Roy began volunteering every Tuesday and Thursday at the Veterans Outreach Center Frank Delgado had built from that San Antonio church hall into a full operation, serving over 400 veterans annually. Roy didn't counsel, didn't lecture. didn't stand at a podium and tell his story like a sermon. He just sat at a table in the common room with a cup of coffee and talked to whoever needed someone to sit across from them. That was all. That was everything. When veterans asked why he gave his time there, he told them about a store in Sanderson, Texas, a pile of coins on a wooden table. A tall man in a Stetson who walked in from the noon light, pulled out a chair, and didn't look away. He didn't fix everything, Roy told them. He just made sure I got to the next day, the rest was mine to do. When Roy died, June found the wooden box on his nightstand. Inside it, exactly as it had always been. The Purple Heart, Frank Delgado's faded card, Clara May's February letter. And one more thing. A small photograph, black and white, worn soft at the edges. Roy standing in front of his San Antonio apartment building in 1965. On the back, in his own handwriting, 4 words. Still here. Thank you, Duke. John Wayne never knew what he saved that afternoon. He didn't need to. He had made his father's promise and kept it. 1 store, 1 table, 1 hand reaching across the wood without hesitation. That is how a legacy begins. Not on a movie screen. In a quiet moment nobody else was meant to see. If this story moved you, subscribe right now and hit the bell. Every week we bring you the real stories behind the legends. Share this with someone who needs it today. And tell us in the comments, what moment hit you hardest? We read every single one.